Today on CityCast DC, dognappings have become surprisingly common in the district, and French bulldogs are a favorite target. Mimi Montgomery has reported on the phenomenon for Axios, and she has a small dog of her own, so this is personal. She sat down with our host Bridget Todd in January to talk about her reporting and tips for keeping your dog safe. Today is Wednesday, July 24th, and here's what DC is talking about.
So Mimi, I know there's been a ton of dog nappings in the area recently. What's going on?
Yeah, definitely. There have been already, I think over at least 11 dog nappings in DC so far in 2024, according to a Post article that came out. And, there's been a string of high-profile ones that have happened in the region over the past couple of years. So what seems to be going on is folks are out walking their dogs, hanging outside with their dogs, or leaving their dogs in the car while they go and run a quick errand, and they're either getting robbed for their dogs or their dogs are getting stolen while they, have them in the car or whatnot. So this is definitely something that has been in the news. You've probably heard about it, read about it, and folks understandably are really worried and scared for their dogs.
In terms of how this happened, it sounds like it's a few different ways, like dogs being forcibly taken by force, and then dogs who are unattended being taken without the owner being there. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So that seems to be sort of like the most common ways this is happening. But then also there was a woman in Springfield who had 3 Frenchies and someone broke into her house to steal some of her dogs. And then there was another instance where someone had posted online that they wanted to sell their dog. And when they went to go meet this person who wanted to buy their dog from them, they just ended up getting robbed and the dog was stolen. There seems to be a couple of different ways this is happening, but primarily, people having the dog taken from them while they're out and about, or, taken from a car or whatnot.
You mentioned Frenchies. I'm thinking is there a kind of dog that is more at risk or is stolen more often? If you've got some sort of purebred, dog, is that more at risk than other kinds of dogs?
Yeah, so it seems to be quote unquote designer dogs that are being most targeted, because folks will often drop thousands of dollars on these dogs. So they're, high value and people can resell them. But yeah, so Frenchies are especially being targeted. I talked about how a lot of these cases have been high profile. A lot of the headlines that we've read have been about Frenchie napping. And so this company called AKC Reunite, which is one of the microchip companies that people hook their dogs up with, French bulldogs have been their number one reported stolen breed each year since 2020. Those are really especially being targeted. And I asked the CEO of AKC Reunite why Frenchies, and he says, well, they're compact, they're small, so they're easier to pick up and steal than a Great Dane or something like that. And they're also really, really popular right now. They were the AKC's number one breed last year, and they're just easily recognizable. So folks, you're on the street, you see their little ears, their little smushed faces, that's a Frenchie. And they're also really expensive. These dogs can often go for $5,000 upwards sometimes. And so they've just sort of become a really sort of obvious and targeted breed for these folks who are looking to steal dogs.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess I think of dogs as companions, but it's also important to remember that with some dogs, they're almost luxury items. And when you're walking around with one, that might be something that folks who mean to do you harm might want to take to make money.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think what's making this super hard hitting for people is that obviously we love our dogs. They're, our best friends, yada, yada, yada. But, I think it's important to remember that in an area like DC where, you have a lot of folks who might be putting off having kids for longer and whatnot, we have this sort of fur baby movement that's happening where our dogs are sort of a lot of people's kids in a way, and not only from an emotional standpoint, but also from a money standpoint. People drop a lot of money, not only to buy these dogs, but then just also throughout their life. So it's you have a big emotional and then financial investment in this animal that has become a part of your family. And so it is really, really awful and horrible for people when these animals, these members of the family, are taken away from them.
By far, the worst part of my morning routine is having to wade through all of the spam in my email inbox. And spam starts with your personal data being sold. Everyday data brokers collect and sell your personal information to third parties. Things like your social security number, your address, phone numbers, even health and financial records. And then scammers, total strangers, businesses, and even the government can use that information to target you. Unless you've got Incogni. INCOGNI. It's this program that totally scrubs your personal information from the web. It only takes 3 minutes to set up, and once it's up and running, Incogni tackles more than 180 data brokers and people search sites. Plus, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. I love a money-back guarantee. Make your mornings spam-free. Get Incogni today. And actually, there's a special code only for CityCast listeners to get 55% off the annual plan. Just go to incogni.com, INCOGNI.com, and use the code CityCast for, again, 55% off. Once again, that's INCOGNI.com, code CityCast.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast. The best way to learn a language is immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. That's how I learned French as a kid. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. I live in a city with a huge immigrant population. You probably do too. And in my hometown, a lot of my new neighbors speak Spanish as a first language, and we have lots of great Mexican and Central American and South American restaurants and stores. I wanted to be able to communicate just a little bit better with some of my neighbors. So I started with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. And after just a few extremely enjoyable weeks learning Spanish with Babbel, I've already gotten comfortable ordering at a restaurant and eavesdropping on my girlfriend's conversations with her mom. Look, learning a language isn't always easy, but with Babbel it is fun and it feels useful, basically immediately. That's why Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So do we have any sense of who is doing the dog napping? And once they actually get the dog, like what happens next?
Yeah, it seems like it is people who are stealing them to resell them based on, the reporting that I did and what I've heard from folks. And so it sounds like, they are taking these dogs and then trying to resell them. And, the folks who have had their dogs stolen, are going to the police, filing police reports. The police are putting out, press releases with images of the dog and whatnot. And, and then in some cases, like, folks are able to be reunited with their pets, but in other cases, they're not, which is really sad. And some of the stolen dogs are still missing. And there was a case, I believe, a couple of years ago where, a French bulldog was taken and it was actually later found dead. So it's really awful.
That's horrifying.
Yeah, it's so sad. I feel awful for all these people.
So if someone does unfortunately get their dog stolen, what should they do? Like what should be their next step in terms of trying to get them back or get more information about what to do?
Totally. Well, I think it's important to mention that, I did ask someone from the police about this, and they said that if someone comes up to you on the street and tries to take your dog, this is a hard thing to do, but let them take the dog, if you were being held at gunpoint or whatnot. And then they recommend having some really good photos of your dog on your phone that you can then show to the police so that they can use them in a press release or whatnot. And to get a really good look of the person who might be trying to take your animal from you so that you can later then describe them to police. Definitely contact the police right away after it happens, file a police report, and, have all of that information handy that you can hand over to them so that they can use it in press releases and whatnot and get the word out. And definitely alert your microchip company if you have your dog registered with one, because then they can also sort of blast that out to all of their affiliates, like local vets and whatnot, and get the word out that this dog is missing too.
Yeah, your answer reminds me so much of this interview we did with Emily Davies about crime in DC, where she talked about how because of the rise in crime in DC, the guidance around it has really changed. And so with carjackings, for instance, they used to say like, oh, well, you probably won't be carjacked. It's very unlikely. And now the guidance that we're getting from officials is like, well, if you do get carjacked, here's what you need to know. The most important thing is to stay calm, things like that. And so we've had a real shift in how I think officials are talking about how we think about these crimes and if they might occur in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, totally. And, I talked to some folks in the area who own French bulldogs. And actually, full disclosure, I myself own a French bulldog.
So this is like personal for you then.
This is personal. I'm like, I have a vested interest in this for myself. I'm worried about my dog Ziggy. But yeah, so a lot of the folks I talked to, they are really like taking steps to sort of be super cautious when taking their dogs out. They are trying to sort of keep to high traffic areas when they're walking their dogs, trying to, if they have to go out at night, like maybe walking with like a partner or a friend so they're not alone. A lot of folks I spoke with are keeping, those like little personal alarms like on their dog's leash or something like that. And then, not walking with headphones in is something that dog walkers and some other folks I spoke with recommended so that you could, hear if someone comes up to you. And then, not using retractable leashes is another tip because the dog can get further away from you that way. And obviously, folks recommended getting your dog microchipped or using like an air tag. You can put them on their collars and whatnot. So yeah, people are really taking precautions and are pretty worried about this, if they have a dog in the city.
If you were interested in buying a dog, like let's say that you're in the market for a dog, are there things that you should be thinking about to avoid accidentally buying someone's dog that was like violently stolen from them?
One big thing is how much this dog is being sold for. So if it's like a designer dog and the price is pretty low, that's kind of a little suspicious. And then also you can often ask for like paperwork from someone if you're getting a dog for them. So like previous vet records and all that stuff. And they don't have that handy. That's a little suspicious too. And then the AKC actually, you can often, if it's a dog, a breed that the AKC recognizes, you can register your dog with the AKC, or sometimes they'll have lists of breeders, whatnot. So that's another good way to go about it. So, see the dog's AKC registered, or, do some research. Is this person like a reputable breeder? Do they have like a website? All that good stuff. So it's kind of a bummer that this is something folks have to think about now, but definitely do your research, I would say, before buying a dog now.
I'm curious, is this like a DC specific issue, or is DC alone in this becoming a problem like this?
No, it seems like it's a nationwide thing. That group I mentioned, AKC Reunite, they have reported an 140% increase over the last 4 years of folks coming to them to report their dog being stolen. So it definitely seems like, it's a thing that's not just contained to here. You probably heard about this a couple years ago, but Lady Gaga's dog walker was shot and her Frenchies were stolen. So if it could happen to Lady Gaga, it could happen to any of us. So yeah, no, this is definitely like a thing that's happening all around us.
Mimi, are there any other tips that maybe people aren't really thinking about that might be a good way to keep people's dogs safe in DC?
And one other thing that a woman who I talked to who runs this group called DC Bulldog Meetups mentioned is maybe think twice before blasting sort of like, I just got this new puppy on social media, or like, we're going to go hang out at, this beer garden today or whatnot, just because, if that's all over social, that might be a way for folks who are sort of like researching people who they can rob to target you or whatnot. Just be cautious, make sure that you're walking in high traffic areas and not wearing your headphones and all that good stuff, and take care of your little furry friends.
That's great advice, just generally. Maybe we should all be a little more cautious about what we blast to networks of strangers on the internet.
Totally. Yeah. That's a great point.
Mimi, thank you so much for being here, and take care of Ziggy. Take care of that Frenchie.
I know. I will. Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, please consider becoming a member. Your support helps keep our show and the Hey DC newsletter going. Go to membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Bye!
My cat is like, can you give me 1 second?
No, you're good.
Decided this is her podcast. Okay. I think she's calmed down.